Whisper of the Tides. Chapter 2. The Far Island. The small rowboat drifted gently out of the last fingers of silver mist and into open moonlight once more. The wanderer blinked, adjusting to the clearer night. Ahead of him, a shoreline revealed itself. An island, quiet and dark against the glittering water. For a moment, he simply floated and took it in. Tall coconut palms stood in silhouette along the beach, their fronds barely swaying in the light breeze. Behind them, perched on a modest rise, was the faint outline of a lighthouse tower. At its top, through the haze of distance, shone a warm, golden light that slowly rotated, casting a friendly beam out to sea. That must have been the glow he'd seen in the mist, he realized. Not some phantom, but a real lantern guiding him to safe harbor. He smiled to himself, feeling both relief and a lingering sense of wonder. Here he was, exactly where the whispering sea had led him. The young man dipped his oars back in the water and rowed the last stretch toward the island. The sea remained calm, almost effortlessly carrying him in. As he neared the beach, gentle waves began to lap at the hull, the first real sound he'd heard aside from his own breathing in quite a while. A short wooden dock came into view at one end of the cove, jutting out into the water. It looked old, but well kept, planks bleached grey by sun and salt. The wanderer aimed for it instinctively. The bow of the rowboat nudged softly against a piling, making the timber give a soft creak. Grateful, he looped the loose rope around the post to secure the boat. Before he could climb out, a lantern's glow appeared at the landward end of the dock. Someone was approaching. "Ho there," called a voice, kindly and clear, though cracked with age. "Take it slow now. That dock's as rickety as my old bones." The wanderer turned and saw an old man, holding up a hand lantern. The man's face was illuminated in the warm light, deeply lined, with bushy salt and pepper eyebrows and a beard that reached his chest. He wore a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up and suspenders holding up well-worn trousers. Despite the hour, he looked alert and entirely unsurprised to be seeing a stranger arrive by boat in the dead of night. "Hello," the wanderer replied quietly, raising a hand in greeting. He stood up carefully in the boat and then stepped onto the dock. The wood planks felt reassuringly solid under his feet and made a soft, thumping sound under his boots. The old man came forward, lifting the lantern a little to inspect the newcomer. Up close, the wanderer noticed the man had a kind face, with crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that suggested he laughed often. The man's gaze fell briefly to the faint blue glow emanating from the wanderer's cloak pocket. The conch shell still tucked safely away, but he didn't comment on it just yet. "Welcome ashore," the lighthouse keeper said, inclining his head in a cordial nod. "I had a feeling I might be getting company tonight." He spoke in a relaxed, matter-of-fact way, as if visits by mysterious rowboat were an occasional but not unwelcome occurrence. The wanderer couldn't hide his curiosity. "You were expecting me?" he asked as he fell into step with the old man. Together, they began walking down the dock toward the beach. The lantern light bobbed gently, illuminating weathered planks and the occasional bent nail underfoot. The keeper gave a half shrug and a chuckle. "Well, I didn't know who exactly, or when, but I've been out here long enough to learn the signs." They reached solid ground, stepping onto the packed sand of the path. The beach around them glowed under the moon's gentle silver, but within the lantern's halo colors came alive, the green of scrubby bushes at the edge of the sand, the brown of fallen palm fronds. The wanderer looked at the keeper with intrigue. "What kind of signs?" The old man cleared his throat softly. "Ah, where are my manners? You've had a long journey, I'll wager. Let's get you settled first. Come on, my cottage is just up the way. We can talk in comfort." He motioned for the wanderer to follow. A narrow footpath led from the beach into a grove of palms and sea pines. The sandy soil was interspersed with flat stones, like an informal walkway. As they left the shoreline, the sounds of the gentle surf faded slightly, replaced by the soft chorus of nighttime crickets hidden in the grass. High above, the lighthouse's golden beam swept slowly over the treetops and back out to sea, a reassuring presence. Walking behind the keeper, the wanderer felt an unexpected calm wash over him. Here he was, basically at the ends of the earth in the middle of the night, following a stranger. Yet nothing about this felt dangerous or wrong. In fact, each step inland filled him with a growing sense of safety, as if he were returning to a place he knew, rather than arriving for the first time. It reminded him of visiting his grandfather's farm as a child, the same feeling of being welcomed and looked after. Before long, they emerged from the palm grove into a little clearing. The lighthouse tower stood off to the right, rising about 4 stories high. Its stone walls were whitewashed, dull in the dark, with a gallery and railing near the top where the lantern room was. Attached to the base of the tower was a small cottage, its outline defined by the lantern the old man carried, and by another faint warm glow from a window. The roof was thatched with palm leaves, and a wisp of smoke curled from a stone chimney, the comforting sign of a lit hearth within. The keeper unlatched a low gate made of driftwood, leading the wanderer into a sandy yard around the cottage. A couple of old stumps and crates fashioned into stools sat outside the door, and coiled ropes and netting hinted at fishing work. The wanderer also noticed a neat stack of firewood and an old ceramic water jug sitting handy by the wall. A black and white cat that had been dozing on one of the stumps lifted its head at their arrival and gave a slow blink. "Go on in and have a seat," the keeper said as he opened the cottage door. "Mind the step there." Inside the cottage was one cozy room, modest in size. The wanderer ducked under the door frame and felt a wave of warmth and the smell of wood smoke and something savory, perhaps stew, envelop him. It was a simple home. To one side stood a small iron stove with a kettle gently steaming on top, and a few pots and pans hanging from hooks. In the center, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, currently strewn with an open logbook, some loose papers, and a pair of reading spectacles. Against the far wall, built into an alcove, was a bed piled with a patchwork quilt, and at its foot a large sea chest. Shelves lined with books, shells, and other knickknacks covered much of the wall space. An old oil lamp hanging from a beam gave off a steady yellow light, complementing the glow from the hearth in the stove. The wanderer took it all in with a grateful sigh. After so much open sky and sea, the snug little cottage felt like the very definition of shelter. He slipped off his satchel and set it near the door, and as he moved, the conch shell inside shifted and cast a faint blue gleam through the canvas. The old keeper noticed. His eyebrows arched just a touch. Still, he said nothing of it. Instead, he busied himself clearing a few papers off the table to make space. "Sit, sit," he insisted kindly, gesturing to one of the chairs. "You must be tired. Can I offer you something warm to drink? I've got herbal tea and some broth that's been simmering." "Tea would be wonderful, thank you," the wanderer replied. realizing suddenly how dry his throat was. Until now, the excitement had kept him going. But in the comfort of the cottage, he felt the full weight of his journey in his bones. He sank into the offered chair, which gave a tiny squeak of protest before settling under his weight. The keeper poured hot water from the kettle into a chipped clay mug, added a pinch of dried leaves from a tin, and brought it over. Let that steep a moment. It's a blend of island herbs, nothing fancy, but it's soothing. The young man wrapped his hands around the mug, feeling its warmth. I can't thank you enough. I realize I haven't even introduced myself. My name is... He hesitated. In truth, he had many names from his travels, nicknames and such, but none that felt permanent. Finally, he just said with a sheepish smile, "Well, folks usually just call me the Wanderer." The old man's eyes crinkled as though that answer pleased him. "Aye, that fits. I'm just the keeper around these parts. Or Josiah, back when there were more folks to do any calling," he added. He settled himself into the other chair with a slight grunt, stroking his beard. Not many souls on this island besides me nowadays, so I don't hear my own name much. The Wanderer blew on his tea and took a careful sip. It tasted of mint and something floral. "Are you the lighthouse keeper then?" he asked. Josiah nodded. "That I am. Been tending that light over there going on, 25 years now. Maybe a bit more." He gazed toward the ceiling for a second, as if the years were painted up there. "Came here as a young man to assist the previous keeper and just stayed on. Can't complain. It's a quiet life, but a good one." A log in the stove shifted, sending a brief swirl of embers up the chimney and a soft glow across the room. The Wanderer felt himself relax further. He found it remarkable how quickly he felt comfortable with this keeper Josiah, as if visiting an uncle he hadn't seen in ages. "Earlier, on the dock, you mentioned you had a feeling someone might come. What gave you that feeling?" the Wanderer asked gently after a moment. Josiah looked at him shrewdly, but with kindness. "Straight to the heart of it, eh? All right, you're owed an explanation." He took a sip from his own mug of broth and then set it down. "Tell me first, what brought you here? I sense the sea didn't let you go lightly, not on a night like this." The younger man chuckled softly at how accurately that summed it up. He reached into his satchel and carefully drew out the conch shell, which was still faintly glowing, though less than before. The cottage light now mostly outshone it. "To be honest, sir, I think this brought me here." He held the shell reverently. Its pearlescent surface caught the lamplight, and the engraved patterns along its lip threw tiny shadows on the table. Josiah leaned in, eyes widening just a bit as he examined the shell. He didn't touch it, but there was unmistakable recognition in his gaze. He exhaled almost in relief. "So it's come again," he said under his breath, nodding slowly. "I wasn't just imagining things." "You've seen one of these before?" the Wanderer asked, heart quickening. He hadn't expected the old man to actually know what it was. "Not exactly, but I've heard tell. My old mentor, the keeper before me, described something like it once. A shell that carries the ocean's voice." Josiah sat back, eyes distant in memory. "He was here, let's see, a good 50 years before you were born, I reckon. And in his time, a traveller much like yourself arrived with a story about a whispering sea and a glowing shell. My mentor was a boy then, apprenticed to the keeper of that day, and he remembered the event clear as yesterday even when he was old. passed the tale to me when I was knee-high. The wanderer listened intently, hardly daring to breathe too loud for fear of missing a word. So it has happened before, he thought, feeling a mix of astonishment and validation. Josiah continued, voice quiet and respectful as he addressed the shell as much as the man holding it. They call it the whispering tide in these parts, a rare thing. Once in a generation, perhaps, sometimes two. The sea carries a message, and it finds the ears of someone who needs to hear it. He looked up, meeting the wanderer's gaze. Tonight, that someone appears to be you, son. The wanderer felt a slight shiver, not of fear, but of significance. He glanced down at the conch in his hands, the sea's message, meant for him. I did hear something, he confirmed softly. At first I thought I was losing my mind, but it guided me. Voices, or at least one voice. That's how I found the boat and ended up here. Josiah reached across the table and gently patted the young man's forearm reassuringly. You're not crazy. Or if you are, then we both are, because I heard a bit of it myself tonight. You did? The wanderer was surprised. Aye. Not as clearly as you would have, I suspect. For me, it was more a feeling in the air, and the waves sounded different. Hard to explain. The keeper scratched his head. Like an extra harmony in their crash, calling to something in my bones. I just knew the tide was speaking to someone. So I lit the beacon and put on a fresh pot of broth, just in case. He chuckled. Didn't expect you'd actually drift out of the fog so soon. But here we are. The wanderer found himself smiling at the thought of this kindly old-timer, preparing as if for a guest after sensing a magical change in the wind. I'm glad you were here, he admitted. I don't know what I expected to find, but a friendly face and a warm fire certainly surpass anything I dreamed of. Josiah waved off the notion that it was anything special. The island provides us what we need when we need it. I've learned that over years. You showing up confirms it yet again. He tilted his head. So what's your part in all this, do you think? The sea doesn't call people on whims. The younger man paused, turning the heavy question over. I'm not sure, he admitted. He gazed around, eyes finally settling on a small framed sketch on the wall. It depicted a younger Josiah, standing with another man by the lighthouse, a ship in the distance. Perhaps a memory of his own arrival, or a friend's visit. I've been wandering for a long time, searching for something I can't even name. Purpose, maybe, or belonging. When I heard that voice, it felt like an answer, or at least the start of one. Like something out there knew I was looking and wanted to show me something. Josiah nodded thoughtfully, wrinkles deepening as he pursed his lips. That tracks. The last fella, well, the one from my mentor's story, came seeking healing, if I recall. Lost his wife to fever and was angry at the world. The sea calmed his heart, they said. The time before that, an old sailor who'd never found home was guided here and lived his last days in peace among island folk. Different needs, different gifts. He gave the wanderer a kind but penetrating look. Only you will know what the sea's gift means for you, once you find it. The wanderer unconsciously straightened up in his chair. Hearing this had set his mind racing with questions. What happened to those people? The ones who heard the whisper before? Did they stay here? The keeper tapped a finger on the table, thinking. The grieving man did stay a good while. Ended up helping build this very cottage, in fact, and planting those coconut palms outside. Left behind a journal of poems he wrote while listening to the waves. It's probably in one of these chests. He gestured vaguely to a stack of seagrass baskets near the foot of the bed. As for the old sailor, that was long, long ago. He was here before the lighthouse was built. Local legend says he became part of the island itself, whatever that means. Perhaps buried here or just remembered in the wind and trees. The wanderer sipped the last of his tea, which had cooled. The notion that others before him had come on similar journeys made him feel part of a story much larger than himself. It was reassuring, and yet it also stoked his curiosity even more. Josiah saw the myriad emotions play across the younger man's face. He chuckled softly. "It's a lot to take in, I reckon. And here I am, babbling away. You've only just arrived. You must want to stretch your legs and see where you've landed." "I admit, I am eager to have a look around," the wanderer said. Now that he'd rested a bit and warmed up, his restlessness was returning, in a good way. This island felt full of quiet marvels waiting to be discovered. The keeper stood with a satisfied groan. That chair was a tad unforgiving after an hour of sitting, and his knees let him know. "Come on then, the night's still young. The moon will give us enough light, but I'll bring the lantern all the same. There's one spot in particular I'd like to show you." They left the cottage, the cat weaving affectionately around the wanderer's ankles as he stepped out, earning a happy scratch behind the ears in return. Outside, the night air was fresh but mild. The hush of the sea was a constant background murmur. Now and again, a breeze stirred the palm fronds, making a sound like distant rain. Josiah led the way along a narrow path past the lighthouse. The structure loomed above them, its stone glowing faintly in the moonlight. The great lantern up top had done its duty for the evening. The keeper paused to extinguish it for now, saying, "No sense burning oil when we've no ships due. Seas are gentle tonight. No one will wreck on these sands." He closed the glass panel carefully, and the beam that had swept the sky winked out, leaving only star and moonlight to illumine the island. Carrying the now sole lantern, Josiah guided the wanderer beyond the cleared area around the lighthouse into a thicker grove of trees and shrubs. The path underfoot became springy with moss in places, and the calls of night insects and perhaps a distant owl punctuated the quiet. Fireflies, just a few at first, then more, flickered in the underbrush. Tiny wandering stars at ankle height. The wanderer watched them with delight, each pulse of light drawing his gaze from one bush to the next like a slow-motion dance. "This looks like something out of a fairy tale," he said softly, not wanting to speak too loud in the serene darkness. Josiah chuckled. "Aye, caught me by surprise the first summer I spent here, those little lights. Never saw so many back on the mainland. They like the still water and the wildflowers around here." The trees began to thin after about 5 minutes of walking, and the ground sloped gently upward. The wanderer realized they were crossing the island toward its center. Presently, through the trunks and leaves, an open space became visible ahead, a clearing under the open sky. Josiah halted and held up the lantern. "Mind your step now. The lagoon is right here, and it's dark at the edges." The wanderer stepped past a screen of ferns and caught his breath at the sight. A hidden lagoon lay before them, not large, perhaps the size of a village pond, circular and utterly still. A fringe of smooth black rocks ringed the water, and a few low-hanging branches from nearby trees trailed into the pool. Above, the sky was cloudless, and the stars shone fiercely. On the lagoon's glass-like surface, those stars were mirrored perfectly, joined by a ghostly echo of the crescent moon. For a heartbeat, the wanderer felt as though he were gazing into a portal to the cosmos itself. Josiah lowered the lantern, shuttering it a bit so as not to spoil the natural darkness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured. "Many a night I've come here just to think." The wanderer nodded wordlessly. He stepped carefully onto a flat rock at the water's edge. There was no ripple. The water might as well have been a sheet of black ice for all it moved. He could see straight down through the clear pool. It wasn't deep, maybe chest high at the center, shallower near the edges where pale sand lay beneath the ripples of water. What caught his attention were the shells. Countless seashells, mostly light in color, had settled on the lagoon's bottom. They must have been brought in by birds, or perhaps during high storms, when sea spray carries things over the lip of the rocks. They weren't scattered randomly. Instead, they seemed to form faint spiraling patterns and lines. Some were arranged in gentle curves, others clustered in shapes that looked almost deliberate. He furrowed his brow, leaning down a little. Yes, one grouping of shells definitely looked like a deliberate line that curved and looped back. Nature often created patterns, true, but there was something about these that gave the wanderer the uncanny sense of intention, as if someone had laid them out long ago as a message. "I see you've noticed," Josiah said quietly at his shoulder. "Those shells have lain like that since before my time. The old keeper before me said they were like that when he first came as a boy." "They're almost like letters," the wanderer said. In some places, the arrangements reminded him of script. Not any alphabet he knew, but the way an unknown alphabet might appear in pieces and parts. He recalled the engravings on the conch shell's lip. Quickly, he pulled it out again. The thing was becoming his constant companion this night. Even in the low lantern glow, he could make out tiny whorls and etched symbols on it. He compared them to a cluster of shells aligned in the sand under the lagoon's water. His pulse quickened. Though one was tiny and the other large, they shared a similar swirling motif. Josiah watched him carefully. A traveler from long ago, perhaps the very first to follow the whispering tide, was said to have spent a night out here by that lagoon, arranging shells under the starlight. Some say in a trance, communing with the sea. Others say she was just an artist at heart. Either way, she left something behind, the wanderer murmured. He was entranced, trying to trace the patterns with his eyes, like following an ancient puzzle. It was too vast and subtle to solve tonight, but he felt certain it was no accident that he was here to see it. The lantern light caught the edge of one particularly large conch lying near the center of the lagoon. Could it be a twin to the one he held, casting a ripple of light outward? The wanderer suddenly yawned, surprising himself. The combination of the soft darkness, the gentle night sounds, and the lateness of the hour was catching up to him. Josiah noticed. "All right, enough discoveries for one night," he said kindly, putting a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "Even the stars get tired by morning, and we've a few hours yet till dawn. Let's get you back and into a proper bed. But first, one more quick stop. I think it'll set your mind at ease for the night." He nodded toward the looming shape of the lighthouse a short distance away. The tower wasn't far. The path had curved in a loop and brought them not too distant from the base of the lighthouse again, but on the opposite side. They approached the lighthouse door, which was an old piece of oak, swollen and heavy from years of sea air. Josiah produced a key from his pocket, one among several jangling on a ring, and fiddled with the iron lock. "Sticks sometimes," he muttered, then gave the door a firm shove with his shoulder. With a reluctant scrape, it opened, and a bit of dust tumbled from the lintel as it did. The interior was cool and echoed slightly. A spiral staircase of stone steps wound upward around the inside wall with a simple iron railing. At the base, there were a few crates and tools, nothing out of the ordinary. Josiah lifted the lantern to guide them as they began to climb. "Watch your head," he cautioned where the stairway ceiling dipped at the first turn. The wanderer, a little taller than the keeper, instinctively ducked. The stone felt cold and a tad damp to his touch as he trailed a hand along for balance. The sea's presence was here too. He could faintly smell salt and old kelp even inside the tower, likely from decades of ocean spray soaking the stones. They ascended in silence, their footsteps making a soft scuff-scuff on the well-worn steps. At each half-turn, there was a narrow slit window in the wall, offering a glimpse of the night outside. Through one, the wanderer caught sight of the lagoon sparkling. Through another, he saw the open ocean, black and endless, with just the faintest white line of moonlit surf along the reef. After perhaps 50 steps, they reached the top. The staircase ended at a hatch, which Josiah pushed open. They emerged into the lantern room, where the large glass lens of the lighthouse lamp encircled the central apparatus. By now, with the flame extinguished, the machinery stood dark and silent, and the view through the glass panels was a panoramic sweep of the starlit horizon. The keeper's clutter of living was absent up here. It was a functional space, but there was a small wooden cabinet built into the wall, and a stool where one might sit while tending the light through the night. Resting on that cabinet, the wanderer saw a book, large and bound in cracked leather. It had clearly seen better days. Even from a distance, he could tell its pages were yellowed and many-handled. He didn't need Josiah's prompting to guess that this was something important. Josiah set the lantern down on the floor gently. In the stillness of the tower top, he spoke in a near whisper. "This is the logbook I mentioned. Not the official lighthouse log. That one's boring as can be, just weather and ship sightings. This here is different." The wanderer approached reverently. Embossed on the cover, barely legible, were the words HMS Star of May, Captain's Log, and a year from long, long ago. It was a ship's logbook, not a lighthouse keeper's journal. Was there a ship? He began to ask. "Wrecked just off the reef, nearly a century back," Josiah answered. "Locals managed to save some of the crew and cargo. This logbook washed ashore intact in a watertight chest. Or so the story goes. It's been passed down, keeper to keeper, as a bit of island lore. And because of one page in particular," he gently opened the heavy cover. The wanderer peeked in. The entries at the beginning were written in neat script. Dates, coordinates, notes about weather, daily happenings on board the vessel. Josiah carefully turned the pages, which crackled faintly. Many entries were damaged by water stains around the edges, but still legible in the center. Finally, about 2/3 through, the keeper stopped. "Here," he said, tapping a page lightly with a calloused finger. "Read this." The wanderer bent over the book, squinting in the dim light. Josiah angled the lantern up a bit to illuminate without letting the flame directly touch the brittle paper. The entry was dated. He noted the month and day, though the year was smudged by a long, dried blot of salt water. The handwriting was shakier here, as if written in distress or as a final act. "We lie becalmed near an island unmarked on our charts. 3 nights now without wind, provisions low, crew anxious, but strangest of all, the sea at night whispers. I hear it in my dreams and waking hours alike. It led me to safe harbour, and the islanders have been kind. The lighthouse keeper speaks of a local legend. When the time is ripe, the sea reveals its heart. I feel on the cusp of understanding, but dawn approaches. If fate is kind, tomorrow we shall venture to the heart of the island where, they say, a secret waits. My hopes cling to this. May this log be found should I not return. The entry ended abruptly there. Below it, the rest of the page was blank, except for some faded ink that looked like it might have bled through from whatever had once been written on the now missing next page. It appeared the last pages of the log had been torn out. The wanderer read the key line again, whispering it aloud. When the time is ripe, the sea reveals its heart. As he spoke, he felt a slight tremor in the silent tower. Or perhaps it was in his own chest. He recognized that this must be what the summary meant as the cryptic line. The wording resonated deeply within him. It felt important, though he couldn't yet say why or what exactly the heart of the sea was. Josiah let him absorb it for a few moments. Then he closed the logbook gently. That line's been passed around on this island in hushes and wonders ever since. Some say the captain found what he sought. Others say he and the crew left and took the secret with them. The ending of that story is lost to time. Those last pages, we never found them. The wanderer straightened up, processing everything. So this wasn't just about him, or even just a couple of past individuals. It seemed the sea's whisper had touched the lives of many over centuries. Do you think the heart of the sea is something on this island? Or was it metaphorical? He mused, thinking aloud. The keeper spread his hands. I suspect you'll find out soon enough. These things tend to unfold in their own way. If the sea brought you here, it won't leave you hanging forever. Patience is key. He gave a wry smile. Trust me, I know waiting. 20-odd years on a lonely rock teaches you that. The wanderer nodded. He placed his palm on the logbook cover for a moment, almost a gesture of thanks to the unknown captain who wrote those words. I appreciate you showing me this, Josiah. It helps. In a strange way, it helps knowing others have heard and followed this call. Josiah picked up the lantern again and motioned towards the hatch to head down. You've got a clearer picture now of where you stand, caught up in an old, ongoing story. But remember, no one can tell you're part of it but you and the sea itself. Just as they began to descend, a gentle breeze swept through the open windows of the lantern room, causing the flame in Josiah's lantern to flicker. The shadows in the room danced briefly. Both men paused. The breeze was cool and carried the unmistakable scent of the ocean up into the tower. It felt like a sign of some sort, not alarming, but noticeable in the previously still air. Josiah tilted his head, listening. The wanderer listened too. Far below, at the base of the lighthouse and beyond, came the quieting sound of waves pulling back from the shore. The tide was retreating further, its whisper, which perhaps neither had consciously noticed was still underpinning the silence, now receding. It was as if the ocean, which had been speaking in the background all this time, was telling them, "That's enough for tonight." The old keeper's eyes met the wanderers, and they shared an understanding without saying a word. The magic of the night was gently winding down. Whatever was going to happen next, it would come at its own time, likely with the next turn of the tide or the next midnight. Time to rest, I think, Josiah said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, the tone one might use in a church or holy place, not wishing to disturb lingering spirits. He closed the logbook and latched the cabinet. They descended the spiral stairs, each lost in their own thoughts. The wanderer's mind swirled with images, the intricate shell patterns in the lagoon, the words in the logbook, the notion of the sea's heart waiting to be revealed. Yet despite all the unknowns, he felt at peace. The island welcomed him, and he was in good company. Back outside, the stars blinked overhead, slightly fewer now as a very faint silver of pre-dawn began to touch the eastern horizon. They returned to the cottage under that brilliant night sky. The hush was profound. Even the crickets had quieted as if taking a nap before morning. Josiah showed the wanderer to a small cot he'd made up near the bookshelf, apparently prepared in advance with fresh linens and a pillow. Figured you might need a spot to lay your head, he said, almost shyly, as if apologizing for the humble accommodations. This is more than I could ask for. Thank you, the wanderer responded earnestly. The cot looked exceedingly inviting. Before turning in, the young man stepped outside one last time. Josiah had gone to bank the stove and give the cat a final scratch, leaving him alone for a minute. The wanderer walked a few paces into the yard. The sky to the east had the barest hint of lighter blue, heralding that dawn was not far off, though it was still night for a while yet. He watched the ocean out beyond the cove. The waves were merely a gentle rumour now, the tide very low. He closed his eyes, just listening. The magical whisper was gone for now. The sea was back to its natural quiet song. He felt an immense gratitude. Lifting the conch shell, still faintly glowing, though fading as well, as if it too slept, he whispered to it, or to the sea through it, "Good night, and thank you for bringing me here." Whether it was his imagination or something more, he fancied he heard a single, distant chord from across the water in reply, like a whale's call or a deep bell, so low he felt it more than heard it. It echoed just once, and then silence resumed. Smiling, the wanderer returned inside and eased onto the cot. He was asleep within minutes, the conch shell cradled safely beside him and his mind drifting between thoughts of what the heart of the sea could possibly be, and the comforting notion that here on this far island, he might just find what he had been seeking all along. Across the water, back on the porch of a seaside cottage on another shore, the writer who had been faithfully listening felt the last echoes of the whispered story ebb away. The final image of an old lighthouse keeper guiding the wanderer to bed lingered in the writer's drowsy mind. He realized he had half slipped into a trance, as one does when a soft-spoken tale is told late into the night. The waves near his porch were lazily nuzzling the sand, normal as ever. The writer stretched and noticed the first pale light of dawn creeping into the sky. A single night had somehow contained an entire chapter of adventure. He picked up his notebook with a contented sigh and jotted a few lines. Something about an island and a lighthouse, just to anchor the memory. Then he leaned on the porch railing, gazing at the now greyish-blue sea. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, lay that far island of the story, and on it, a young man slept safe and sound, waiting for the next whisper of the tides to guide him. The writer felt a kinship with him. After all, both were listening for the same next chapter. As a gentle morning breeze rustled the dunes, The writer whispered to the sea, "I'll be here tomorrow night." He had absolute faith the story would continue when the time was right, when the tide was ripe, so to speak. With that promise hanging softly between him and the sea, he turned and went inside, as the sky in the east grew ever brighter. The world of the far island would rest now under the sun, holding its secrets patiently until darkness fell again. And when it did, both the wanderer on the island and the writer on the distant shore would be waiting, ears open to catch the next quiet, wondrous whisper from the ocean's heart.